Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We're going back to that horrible world known as the JRC, but before we do, the usual disclaimers, and let me drink some of this tea here. So, I had some ridiculously good news that has essentially taken all the stress that has been built up over the last decade out of my body in an instant. Instant. Okay? To the point that I'm in a special level of autistic fog brain. But I'm not even frustrated with it. I'm not going to elaborate on what that is. Just. Ugh. I love it when bills are paid and I don't have to worry about things getting in on time. My automatic payments are going to go through. I get to do my fun little extras without crying as the money leaves my wallet. It's a beautiful feeling, folks. Beautiful feeling. All right. To the disclaimers, shall we? In the description box, you're going to find a link to the article that the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center doesn't want you to read. It's written by NeuroClastic, a small non-for-profit started by autistics for autistics, wherein they interviewed and surveyed over 900 ABA professionals in regards to the JRC's so-called behavior modification program. Matter of fact, the JRC doesn't want you to read this article so much. They have threatened NeuroClastic with a defamation lawsuit if they did not remove it from the website. NeuroClastic has refused, so you know the drill. Please read that article and share it on all your social media. Also included in there, the Ozarks' first article in regards to Agape Boarding School, now known as Stone for Help Boarding School, a so-called Christian-themed boarding school based out of Stockton, Missouri that takes in so-called troubled male teens, that has impending over 21 civil lawsuits, claims, and allegations leveled against it, all which have been substantiated by the Missouri Department of Social Services, and they include the following: sodomy, rape, sexual assault, child abuse, psychological and emotional abuse, child trafficking, starvation, and that's just for starters. You have one former staff member arrested by the FBI, another a doctor, still on the premises, with full access to the boys, up on multiple, again, substantiated claims of sodomy, rape, and a sexual assault of the boys there. You have an attorney general too busy chasing after drag queens and trying and failing to defund public libraries to actually do his job. You got a governor office nuts sent help. Read that article. Share it on all your social media. We got the other pertinent links to the Stop the Shocks campaign as well, including Autistic Hoya's massive archive on the subject, Jennifer Masumba's behavioral sheet of shockable offenses, a clip out of the 7-hour ordeal undergone by Andre McCollins back in 2002, the templates, and the ever-present, very self-explanatory Change.org Shut the Judge Rotenberg Center Down petition. When we discuss the JRC, folks, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips of surveillance footage of people with disabilities being tortured and abused. If you got young children present, folks, please go ahead and use those headphones, all right? All right, this channel is marked not for children for a reason. We use profanity on occasion and speak on dark subjects. If your child is 16 and younger and they are watching this, very obviously parental supervision is very much advised, all right? Okay. Back to where we left off. We started to get into number 3 here. All right. We may do some rereading because I want to go over these 2 paragraphs again. As of the end of 2009, 27 states had any kind of binding laws or regulations that limited the use of restraint and seclusion in public schools. Of the others, 8 had non-binding policy guidelines on the subject. A number of states also have licensing regulations on private and special alternative educational programs. State laws and regulations differ across a number of axes, including but not limited to what the law actually exists, what type of programs and settings it covers, what agencies established the relevant regulations, and how it defines certain terms, and of course, what it allows, prohibits, and requires. So here's my bitch with the GOP. They keep running states' rights, states' rights, states' rights, states' rights, right all the damn time. There's a problem with that. When you leave it to the states to handle, you have to deal with the biases that are pretty much cemented in that state. Which means if you're like moi and you live in a state that doesn't give a shit about disabled people unless it's time to start an election and you want to push those anti-abortion laws, nobody cares about us. In fact, the GOP will quietly, or they would if I weren't here to be a loudmouth to tell you all about it, take massive amounts of money out of the special education programs, out of departments like DMH or Department of Mental Health, every year, folks, every year. In particular, Eric Greitens, for that very brief time that piece of human ableist garbage was in office, almost made it impossible for DMH to continue to operate. The majority of the programs that provide community-based services in my state almost came to a grinding halt. The wait list went up massively. The individuals that were let through on state services was little trickle, folks. They had to prioritize physical disabilities over those of us with developmental disabilities. The list goes on, okay? Okay? When you leave things up to the states, more often than not, when it comes to disability rights and disability politics, period, yeah, it's a murky road, folks. I know what I'm talking about on this one. Very murky. It wasn't until around this time, within about a year and a half of me being on the Missouri Autism Commission, that there was finally a set guidelines when it came to, get this, folks, establishing what an autism diagnosis looks like to the state. Literally how to nail down the criteria throughout the entirety of the state that would allow for someone with my disability to be able to get state help. Okay? Yeah. And then there's been pushback and pushback on that because every year the GOP keeps taking money out of our programs. They are running on fumes and prayers, folks. Fumes and prayers. If you want uniform treatment, if you want uniform rights, if you want your kids and other vulnerable individuals with disabilities, if you want our rights actually protected, there's only one way to actually do that, and that is federal, folks. Federal. What you have when you let each state make its own decisions when it comes to populist rights is ununiformed chaos. Some of y'all thrive on chaos. Paul thrives on chaos. I thrive on what I like to call controlled chaos. I can be spontaneous somewhat. I'm autistic. Let's be realistic here. I do like to change things every now and again, even when change tends to be detrimental to me being able to think coherently. are some things, however, that need to be uniform for the sake of the constituents, okay? You can't have autistics have rights in one state, but not in another. And they can get this particular right over here, but this right isn't protected. You see where I'm going with this, right? We're in a particular crisis time right now in my state because those of us in particular who are autistic, who have shown support for the trans community, because of that, they've gone after us. They have removed the right for people who are autistic who want to transition. Now, you might say, well, Tiffany, what's wrong with that? Particularly people who are vulnerable with disabilities they don't understand. How very ableist of you. I'm sorry, but I'm going to say it. If there is a human being on this planet who knows exactly what they want, that's going to be us, folks. We self-analyze every second of every single day, okay? We are literally our own forensic psychologists. And that's something I have found true across the board. Okay? We cannot be bullied, pushed, influenced. All this crap that GOP is trying to say that the trans movement is doing to all us vulnerable autistics. Bullshit. Major bullshit. Because if that were true, AH's little turd stands could have just turned my head and got me to blindly follow their agenda. Well, that's just not how we Audis work or operate, okay? We are analytical to a thought. We have our own core values, and we compromise for no one, okay? But I know it's rambling and kind of getting off topic here. Because of that stance, because we have backed the trans community, those of us who are trans have had that right removed from us. Now, here is what makes it excessive. They are not allowing full-grown autistic adults who are well over the age of 18 to be able to transition. Okay? I want you to wrap your brain around that. If you are autistic in the state of Missouri, and if you are a trans person, I am not, and you are over the age of 18, Missouri says that you are not competent enough to make that medical decision for yourself. Let that sink in. Now let this sink in. It's a slippery slope, folks. Once they take away one right and see that they can get away with it, and the general populace will either do nothing or applaud it, they'll start taking more rights. Because who's to say after that? Well, if they're not competent enough to even realize their own gender, then maybe they're not competent enough to make any of their own medical decisions. Because if you think it can't happen, folks, we got beachfront ocean view property in Kansas we can sell you. Alright? And that's exactly what they've been doing, folks. They've been whittling away at the hard work of a lot of individuals, myself included, that allowed us autistic adults to have some agency. Okay? This is what I mean when I say when you leave it up to the states, it becomes chaos and nobody's rights are actually respected. All right? The reason why I went off on this rant, even though it kind of has nothing to do with what we're talking about here, yet it does. There is no uniform solid federal protections for disabled people. None. None. Let that sink in. None for special education. Zilch. Nada. That means those of us who live out in states like mine are SOL. Alright? This is how things like what goes on in Massachusetts continue to go on year after year, decade after decade, with nothing being done. Okay? Because there are no uniform federal laws that are protecting us from precisely what they get up to at the JRC. See what I'm saying here? If there were federal laws protecting us, if there were specific, very specific guidelines in regards to you being a private school and you are treating as well as educating students with disabilities, then what's going on in Massachusetts right now would not be happening. Okay? That's the problem. All right? Let's read the next paragraph, shall we? The laws and regulations on aversives used in public schools, generally either passed by state legislators or promulgated by state departments of education, vary in their content and their strength. They often overlap with state laws on corporal punishment in schools, either including allowances for or limitations on aversives used on children with disabilities in particular, or carving out an exception for their use on such students in what would otherwise be a total ban. They're even fighting the normal ban, folks, in my state. At least one county, and it's a county-to-county issue out here. I need you to wrap your brain around this for a second. That has voted and has legally passed in their county that it is all right to bring corporal punishment back into high school. I'm not joking. This is not a joke. This happened. And we've got more counties voting on a local level to start doing the same. And that's on our neurotypical kids that get away with literal murder. Now imagine those particular counties and how they treat their disabled kids. There are a number of factors that be used to define the strength of protections they provide. Terms in the text of the law, such as emergency or isolation, may be strictly defined for teachers, staff, and administrators, or by contrast be broad and allow for substantial discretion in determining what interventions are appropriate and legal. We're actually going to stop it there, but you see what I'm meaning here. When you've got no uniformity, when you do not have some solid, nailed down, very specific rights and protections that are put into place across the board, places like Agape and places like JRC exist. Because as far as mental health and the troubled teen industry goes, it's its own animal, it's the same animal in the end. We're going to close out on that. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do tend to get removed from time to time. So please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time. And as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. I'll see you in a few minutes.